It was just after midnight when Emma Bennett received the call. The kind of call that makes you freeze, makes you question whether you've actually heard it or if it's a trick of the mind. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar. Sharp, almost robotic, but tinged with something else that she couldn't quite place. A sense of urgency, of panic. Emma Bennett? Yes, who is this? Her voice was steady, but her heart raced. She wasn't the kind to answer late-night calls, but something in her gut told her this one was important. There's no time for small talk, the voice said, its tone clipped and hurried. I need you to listen carefully. Your life is in danger. They know who you are. They're coming for you. A chill ran down Emma's spine, and for a moment, she thought she might hang up. But something stopped her. Something told her not to. She had been investigating missing persons for the past year, and although she'd been threatened before, this felt different. Real. This wasn't a warning from a disgruntled source. This was something worse. I don't know who you are, but you need to explain what's going on, Emma said, her voice growing more insistent, more forceful. I don't have time for cryptic threats. The voice on the other end seemed to hesitate, as though deciding whether to reveal what it knew. You've been digging into the wrong case, Emma, it finally said. The one you're looking into now, the man who disappeared, Robert Greene, isn't just another cold case. It's the tip of an iceberg. You're uncovering something much darker, much bigger than you realize. Emma's mind raced. Robert Greene. She had been following his case for months now, ever since the source had sent her an encrypted email with a single clue, an address in the middle of nowhere, and the words, "Find him or it will be too late." I've been working on this case for months, Emma said, trying to make sense of the cryptic message. Who are you? What do you know about Robert Greene? And why are you calling me? There was a long pause on the other end. The silence stretched, and Emma felt a growing unease, a nagging suspicion that this call was not just about Robert Greene. It was about something far more dangerous. She wasn't sure why, but deep down, she felt that her investigation had led her to something much more sinister than she could ever have imagined. I don't have much time, the voice continued, snapping Emma back to reality. They're already watching you. They know what you're doing. They've always been watching. Robert Greene isn't the first person to vanish, and he won't be the last. The people behind all of this, they're powerful. They have connections, influence, and they won't stop until they silence you. A cold sweat broke out across Emma's brow, and for the first time in years, she felt fear. Genuine fear. She wasn't just dealing with corrupt politicians or corporate criminals anymore. No, this was something much darker. Something hidden in the shadows of society, waiting for the right moment to strike. I can't protect you, Emma, the voice said, its tone suddenly softer, almost apologetic. But I can give you one piece of advice. You need to get out of town. Now. And don't trust anyone. Especially not the police. Not even your own friends. They're all part of it. Before Emma could respond, the line went dead. The sudden silence was deafening. She stared at the phone, feeling the weight of the conversation settle heavily on her shoulders. She had always prided herself on being rational, on chasing the truth wherever it led her. But this felt different. This felt dangerous. The rain had started to fall when Emma left her apartment the next morning. It wasn't a torrential downpour, just a steady, rhythmic drumming on the pavement, like the world itself was trying to wash away the secrets she was uncovering. She wrapped her coat tighter around her body as she walked to her car, the city streets eerily quiet, save for the occasional sound of a distant car or the soft patter of the rain. Emma's mind was still reeling from the call. She had thought of calling the police, but the voice on the phone had warned her against it. And in her gut, Emma knew something was off. She had spent too many years uncovering corruption, injustice, and betrayal to believe that the authorities would be able to help her now. If anything, they might be part of the problem. She slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, the warm hum of the car offering little comfort. Her hands were cold as she gripped the steering wheel, but she forced herself to focus. She had a job to do. She had always been one to follow the facts, and the facts told her that Robert Greene's disappearance wasn't a simple case of a missing person. Something more was at play. As she pulled into the parking lot of a local diner where she had arranged to meet her source, Emma's thoughts drifted back to the encrypted email she received weeks earlier. The address had led her to a rundown building on the edge of town. There, she had found something that made her stomach turn. Files, dozens of them, filled with names, dates, and strange codes that made no sense at first. But after hours of studying them, Emma realized that the names weren't just random. They were connected. A pattern began to emerge, and that's when she stumbled onto something terrifying. All the missing persons had been involved in a top-secret government project, a project that had been buried deep within the bowels of the city's archives. The door to the diner opened, and Emma's train of thought was interrupted. She glanced up to see a man step inside. He was tall, with a military posture, his face hidden beneath a hooded jacket. He looked around the room and locked eyes with her. Emma's heart skipped a beat. This was her contact, John Miller, a former cop who had been kicked off the force after investigating a string of strange disappearances. He had become an unofficial ally, helping her piece together the puzzle she was trying to solve. John nodded slightly, then made his way over to her table. His face was grim, his jaw clenched. He sat down without waiting for an invitation. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice low, "you were right to reach out to me. We got a serious problem." "I know," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I've uncovered something much bigger than we ever expected." John glanced around the diner cautiously before continuing. "You're getting too close, Emma. These people, whoever they are, they're dangerous. I've had eyes on me for the last few days. We need to move fast before they catch on." The weight of his words hung heavily between them. Emma felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her focus. This wasn't just another case. This was something much larger, a conspiracy that stretched beyond her understanding. "What's the next step?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease gnawing at her. "We need to go to the archives," John said, his expression hardening. "There's a hidden room beneath City Hall. We can't get in there without raising suspicion, but if we find what's locked up down there, it could expose everything." Emma hesitated for a moment. She knew this wasn't just a typical investigation anymore. This was life or death. But it was the only lead they had. And if they didn't act fast, the truth, whatever it was, would remain buried forever. That night, after hours, Emma and John met Matt outside the back entrance of City Hall. He was a wiry, jittery man in his mid-30s, with sharp, calculating eyes that looked around nervously, as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows at any moment. He had worked in the city archives for over a decade, which meant he had access to everything. But also meant he had seen things that had made him more than cautious. Matt had been reluctant at first, but when John had convinced him of the gravity of the situation, he agreed to help. "You sure about this?" Matt asked, his voice quivering as he glanced nervously over his shoulder. "Once we go down there, there's no going back." Emma met his eyes. She had seen that same fear in her own reflection earlier. She didn't like what they were doing, but there was no turning back now. "We don't have a choice." Matt nodded reluctantly. "Fine. Follow me." He led them through a maze of corridors in the bowels of City Hall, past filing rooms and storage areas filled with forgotten documents. The air grew mustier as they descended deeper, the smell of old paper and dust mixing with a faint scent of mildew. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead, casting strange shadows along the walls. Emma felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine as they passed doors marked with labels like confidential and classified, the kind of doors that should never be opened by someone like her. Finally, they reached a heavy steel door at the far end of a narrow hallway. The door was old, its metal frame tarnished with age and neglect, but the lock was new. Matt pulled out a small key from his pocket and unlocked it with a soft click. "This is it," Matt whispered, his eyes darting nervously around the dimly lit hallway. John stepped forward, his eyes narrowed, his hand resting on the handle. "Stay close. We don't know who might be in there." Emma's heart was pounding in her chest as she stepped into the room behind John. It was unlike any archive room she had ever seen. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with files, old records, dossiers, documents, and binders stacked to the ceiling. But what caught her attention wasn't the content of the shelves. It was a large table in the center of the room, covered with more files, scattered haphazardly. At the far end, a single computer sat in the corner, its screen dark. "This is where the real secrets are kept," Matt muttered, his voice thick with fear. "I don't know what's in those files, but I've seen names of people who disappeared. People who shouldn't have been anywhere near these records." Emma moved quickly, scanning the room for any sign of what they were looking for. She had no idea what would be hidden here, but she had a gut feeling that whatever they found would be the key to everything. John stepped over to the nearest shelf, his eyes running over the labels. He pulled a thick binder from the shelf, flipping through it quickly. "Nothing here." Emma moved to the desk, picking up a file at random. She flipped it open, but all she found were more names, dates, and codes that meant nothing to her at the moment. They needed to focus. The misfiled document, the one Matt had mentioned. But where was it? As she scanned the room, her eyes settled on a single file tucked in the far corner of the desk. It was unmarked, its edges frayed as though it had been handled too many times. Emma reached for it, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled it from its hiding place. "Is that it?" Matt asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emma opened the file slowly, her eyes scanning the contents. At first glance, it seemed like another list of names, but then she saw something that made her stomach drop, a name that she had seen before in the file she had uncovered earlier. Robert Greene. But there was something else, something even more chilling, a series of coordinates. And underneath them, a single line of text that seemed to burn itself into her mind. Project Aether. Final stage. Her mind raced as she read the words again. Project Aether. She had never heard that name before, but it was clear now that it was at the center of everything. This wasn't just a missing persons case. This was something far more sinister, something that went deeper than she had ever imagined. Before she could process the implications of what she had just discovered, there was a loud bang from the hallway, followed by hurried footsteps. "We need to go now." John barked, his voice urgent. "They know we're here." Emma's heart skipped a beat. They were already too late. Matt bolted toward the door, but Emma hesitated for a split second, her mind still reeling from the file. Project Aether. What did it mean? Who was behind it? And what did it have to do with Robert Greene? The answers were just within reach. But so was danger. Before she could process the implications of what she had just discovered, there was a loud bang from the hallway, followed by hurried footsteps. "We need to go now." John barked, his voice urgent. "They know we're here." Emma's heart skipped a beat. They were already too late. As they fled into the darkness, Emma realized one terrifying truth. Some secrets were never meant to be uncovered.